welcome to episode 27 of Can We Still Be Friends, the podcast that tests the limits of the friendship between two people who mistake movie taste for personal morality. I'm Nate Goss, here with Ryan Ebling. 35 years ago this week, The Blues Brothers, starring Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi, was released into theaters. In that time, the movie has become considered a classic, the kind of movie that most people just assume you've seen. However, Ryan hadn't seen it before, and it had been a long time since I'd seen it, so we thought a viewing was overdue.
Made for $27 million, The Blues Brothers was one of the most expensive comedies ever made. But it was a big hit, earning $54 million at the box office. And it's earned a respectable 87% on Rotten Tomatoes, but its acclaim rests mostly in its ardent fan base. The Blues Brothers has become the kind of movie that has passed from parents to children, important more as a piece of culture than a piece of cinema.
But 35 years later, is the mission from God still an enjoyable ride?
Or is there no action left in this keyboard? Keep listening.
Me and Elwood, we're putting the band back together. We need you and Blue Lou.
Oh, man, don't talk that way around here. My old lady, she'll kill me.
Ma'am, you gotta understand that this is a lot bigger than any domestic problems you might be experiencing.
Matt, what the hell is he talking about?
Don't get riled, sugar.
Don't get riled, sugar me. Now, you're not going back on the road no more, and you ain't playing in them old two-bit sleazy dives. You're living with me now, and you're not gonna go sliding around with your old white hoodlum friends.
But, babes, this is Jake and Elwood, the Blues Brothers.
The Blues Brothers? Shit. They still owe you money, fool.
Ma'am, would it make you feel any better if you knew that what we're asking Matt here to do is a holy thing?
You see, we're on a mission from God.
Don't you blaspheme in here. Don't you blaspheme in here. Now, this is
All right, so right there you heard Jake and Elwood trying to get the band back together, trying to recruit Matt, Guitar Murphy, but Mrs. Murphy ain't having none of that.
She's not having any of that.
As played by Aretha Franklin.
Right, one of many cameos by some very famous musicians.
And good
musicians,
yes.
sure. Yeah. Classic, important musicians
Yes.
made cameos in this movie.
And the movie we are discussing today is
The Blues Brothers,
Blues Brothers.
right, of course.
Yeah.
35 years young this year, which is kind of, I don't know, is that a milestone year? I guess every 5 years could be considered a milestone year, right?
Why not? But this is a movie that you somehow never saw.
Yeah, I mean, movies like this, if your parents don't have them on in the house or whatever, they're not movies people think to show you. They are movies, though, that people think to, like, you haven't seen that? What? But you know what else I ran into?
To lambast you for not seeing.
Well, I kind of ran into, it was kind of funny. People would say, like, what's your next episode? Blues Brothers. And like, ask what sides we're on. I said, well, I haven't seen it. And they'd be like, you haven't seen it? And I'd say, like, yeah. And then they're like, well, I'm not sure I've seen all of it either. Like,
oh, really?
People just like, they've seen parts of it or they've seen it here and there.
So not only do they assume that you have seen it, they assume they have seen it.
Yeah, right?
That they might not have.
And maybe they've caught parts of it, but it doesn't feel like the kind of movie people sit down and watch.
Huh.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, it's been a long time since I sat down and watched it for sure. So I guess you could put me in that camp.
When you did watch it, did you sit down and watch it? Like, what were the circumstances of you watching it?
I actually remember. I remember my mom saying you should sit down and watch this. It was one of her favorites.
Oh, okay.
And I was probably 10, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
She said you should sit down and watch this. I think you'll like it.
But yeah, so it was your parents. It was
my parents.
Passed down.
Yeah, absolutely. And then at that point, actually, I lived in Indiana, and so I don't know that too many of my other friends had seen it, even though I was a pretty small kid.
Yeah.
But then when I moved up here to the Chicago area, and for those of you who are listeners who maybe don't know us personally, we actually do record. I don't think we've ever actually said where we record from. Maybe we have, maybe we haven't. But
that was for our safety. We didn't want people trying to come to our recordings. But we're in the Chicagoland area.
Exactly. So for us, I think the Blues Brothers, I mean, if you're in the Chicagoland area, it definitely is one of those movies that everyone kind of assumes you've seen. Because Chicago is just so heavily prevalent in the movie. And
like Daily Plaza, everybody, like, that's
like you can just point out all sorts of places in it. So
maybe more so because we live around here that people are just incensed or flabbergasted that I have never seen the movie. I grew up in Wisconsin, and I mean, I still feel like enough people watched it. I do remember people in Wisconsin. You know the scene where the Bluesmobile kind of on that freeway near the end goes off like a ledge.
Mm-hmm.
That I guess was in Milwaukee.
Oh, okay.
That ledge.
So they have a little marker there or something.
No, I don't think so. But like, I just remember people being like, "That was in Milwaukee. You know that, right?"
Yeah.
I'm like,
so it's not a full Chicago.
Of course,
movie.
I don't know that.
All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and before we jump into our full conversation of Blues Brothers,
Yeah.
Upon this, my rewatch, your initial viewing,
Yeah.
on our Letterboxd accounts,
Mm-hmm.
what are you rating this as? Just and no explanation, just to kind of get a base level of where we're coming from.
I'm gonna say a 2.5.
Jeez, Louise, are you kidding?
No,
You're not kidding.
no.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I know. I'm saying 2.5. So
Are you
you've
basically putting it on record that you just hate laughing and having fun and music too?
No.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not supposed to expand on my
No, that's
rating,
fine.
but I
That's
will
just it.
say that I don't hate laughing, and if I had laughed during this movie, maybe I would
Oh
have
my gosh.
rated it higher. But I'm giving you room to help me grow.
Yeah.
I'm starting it on the low end of my feelings
Okay.
towards it.
Okay. My rating this time around, I would say I'm going to do about a 4. I think.
Okay. Again, this might be a tough one because there may be more wrapped up in it for you. Maybe not, though.
I don't think so. I don't think nostalgia plays in this time, because one thing I realized as I was watching it was how little I remembered of it. And so, I felt like in a way I was kind of giving it a fresh viewing, and I didn't have the same kind of nostalgic sense before watching it that I did for, say, like the other movies we've discussed, like Hook or Christmas Story
Or The Sandlot.
or The Sandlot or any of those. I would not put Blues Brothers in that same camp as that, although it was one that I saw as a kid.
And I want to say to our listeners again, I don't hate everything I see. Like
That
I
just
like
seems to be
movies.
the trend lately. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what it is. Am I short-sighted? Am I myopic?
I don't know. I also don't think that it's going to be possible, because we've tried before. And even when I'm talking to other people, it's very hard to actually argue whether something's funny or not.
Yeah.
Comedy is just a hard thing to discuss as far as what makes something funny to somebody, why somebody gets something and somebody else just doesn't think it's funny at all. And once you try to argue it, anybody who found it funny, all of a sudden it sort of sucks all the humor sucks all the humor out of it. So
yeah.
I don't think I'm going to try
Okay.
to get you to believe that Blues Brothers is a funny movie. I mean, either you laugh at it or you don't.
Yeah.
Either you get it or you don't.
I guess.
I mean, for me, I do.
I mean, I do want to hear what you think is funny about it.
Well, I was also thinking, and I didn't really have that many notes for this movie. Like I
didn't
usually write a
either.
lot of notes, but
I have these like 5 notes.
But the only thing that kept coming up in my mind was really thinking, is this even first and foremost a comedy? And I don't know that was necessarily the full intention. I believe that they were trying to get a lot of laughs. But even as you think about the Blues Brothers as the SNL characters, they
were never
really
comedy.
They weren't a comedy.
They were
bit.
they wanted to play music.
They were doing what they wanted to do. It was almost like this piece of, like, as if SNL were just a variety show, and
It's
you had
such an-
these guys. It's an odd thing,
It's a weird. It's so strange to me that they chose these characters to make a movie out of, because they appeared on Saturday Night Live, I think 3 times before the movie aired, and every time they just sang.
Yep.
And the dancing was a little maybe funny because Belushi was overweight, but like
It was never.
there
really
was
played
no
for
character.
laughs.
There was
No.
nothing to it. They were Jake and Elwood Blues in name only. There wasn't this backstory.
They eventually developed one,
Right.
But in SNL, no. I mean, and also they're not like a lot of the SNL characters, especially the ones that you would see later to make their own movies, whether it was Wayne's World or
The Roxbury guys.
the Roxbury guys, or what was the Mary Catherine?
Mary Catherine Gallagher.
Gallagher.
Yeah, Superstar was her movie.
These were characters that, as soon as they hit the screen, you were supposed to be laughing.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it was just their appearance alone. But I don't think they ever drew those laughs out just by they were just kind of supposed to be cool characters almost. Like,
I don't know what they were supposed to be, honestly. I mean, I guess cool. Were they cool?
I think so.
Was the Blues cool?
No, I think that was what was kind of the draw, was almost that they were just sort of almost at the time even just a, kind of a throwback act. In fact, another reason why I think it's weird that they did decide to make Blues. The reason I think they decided to make Blues Brothers was just because John Belushi was on a hot streak.
Yeah.
It was just coming off of Animal House. Aykroyd and Belushi, they both had just this love of the blues, and they were the ones that had to really push Lorne for these characters. Lorne was never sold on these characters.
Yeah.
They just really wanted to play blues music, you know?
Yeah.
And so they made this movie, and I think they were able to get it made because of Belushi.
Right. And Aykroyd. I mean, Aykroyd was a big draw on Saturday Night Live, maybe
but not in movies yet.
But then John Landis had directed Animal House, and so he was,
which was a hit, you know. And we already linked to it on our Facebook and Twitter, but maybe we'll put a link to it on our episode too. But there was a big long Vanity Fair article about the making of Blues Brothers, and one thing that they brought up was that even the musical acts they brought in, you know, Aretha Franklin, Ray Charles, James Brown, Cab Calloway. These guys, they were not popular at the time.
Right.
So they weren't even the draw.
Right.
Maybe Ray Charles. Ray Charles still had a pretty popular following, but everyone else in that movie that you see, the Blues Brothers helped them more than they helped the Blues Brothers, you know. So it wasn't that the musical acts in and of themselves were going to sell the movie. So I don't know. I just think it's this really strange gem of a movie. Like it's just, I love it because it's got funny parts, you know, but it's not just a comedy. It's got great music in it. I mean, I love that music. And as a kid, that was my first exposure to the music. So I guess if there's any nostalgia in there at all, it's just that that's sort of when I was exposed to rhythm and blues music and I liked it, you know. My parents didn't listen to that music regularly. Yeah. So that was all new to me.
Right.
And then as a kid, and even still, just the piles upon piles of crash cars. I thought that was the funniest thing in the world. And it's like the joke that just goes on too long and then it becomes funny again.
Yeah.
Like it's just this, at first you just are like, what is going on? All this destruction of property, and it just seems so irreverent, and this almost seems like something out of Mad Magazine, which I loved as a kid.
I mean, I recognized it as a joke. Like I was like, yep, that's a bunch of cars, way too many cars. And it was fine. I mean, and maybe it was a pioneer in the sort of do something unfunny until it's funny sort of thing.
Yeah, but it doesn't even really feel like that.
No.
I mean, I'm kind of grasping for why I found that funny. I mean, that's sort of it, is just that, like, seeing that many police cars pile into each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just wacky. It's wacky
is.
Stuff. And I mean, I also just love kind of wacky comedies too.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I'm fine with that too a lot of the time. The only time I really thought that overabundance was funny was in the end with like all the cops, all the SWAT team, all the National Guard, and the hup 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 hup.
Yeah.
Like that was
great.
funny.
Yeah.
I smiled during that. I mean, like I recognized it all as jokes. Like I was like, okay.
I guess
see
what
what
I'm
you're doing.
what I'm wondering is you still couldn't enjoy the movie even if you didn't laugh that much.
Yeah, maybe I was trying to see humor too much. I did enjoy the musical sequences.
You did?
Yeah, they were good. I mean, they were good. I didn't find myself getting excited for the next one. Like it's such an episodic movie that just moves from thing to thing to thing. Like it's very clear that it was written by sketch comedy writers. There was obviously an overarching story. They were trying to get that show together too.
It's a very very small plot.
But yeah, it's just it reminds me, and I feel like I've talked about this before. Have you seen that Mitchell and Webb look? And they have that sketch where these two guys are sharing an office and they do two different jobs, and one of them writes porn movies. And he was like, so how do you write a porn movie? And he's like, well, I take a sheet of paper and I write, they have sex 6 different times. And then in between, I write just something happening. And then that's the movie. So he's like, the cable repairman comes over. They have sex. And then like, I feel like that was this movie. It was like they sing a blues song. There's a car chase. They just wrote those a bunch of times and then found some filler to connect them. Just these loose connections of things that I'm supposed to like or be interested in enough that I'm supposed to zone out between them and then just be like, oh, I'm back to being interested again, and then zone out for now this is interesting again, is how I felt it went. And then the jokes, I felt like they just repeated themselves a lot. Not literally, but like deadpan. Like, okay, so Carrie Fisher shows up and blows something up and they're unfazed by it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that happens 3 more times. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, no, I mean, the Carrie Fisher part is one that I never really got and also kind of completely forgot about. I am actually in the space between being a kid watching it and rewatching it. I had forgotten she was even in the movie.
Yeah.
That's how little of an impact she had on, you
Yeah.
know, me even then. Or so, yeah, I mean, I think that there's parts in that movie that are kind of like that maybe didn't need to be there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. I never zoned out. And, you know, some of the recurring jokes, I think they recur, you know, just enough. I don't think it's overdone. Like the whole mission from God thing. I think they said that like 3 times in the movie.
Was
you
it
know,
just 3?
pretty sure. Yeah. And I mean, I never felt like anything was played out too long or anything. And if anything, you just had it building up with these different groups of people who were getting mad at them.
Yeah.
You know, so that by the end you had this buildup that was just
Everybody's
like
chasing
everyone's
them.
after them. So it's cops and Nazis and, you know, the good old boys, which Charles Napier as the leader of the good old boys is hilarious. And there's that scene the first time that they're chasing them and the police are also chasing them after the honky tonk show.
Uh-huh.
There's that scene of them driving in that truck, and like the 4 other bandmates are up in that little sort of like
in
what
the
do you call
RV
it, the
thing.
RV thing, and their heads are just kind of like through the little glass. Oh,
Yeah.
I laughed so hard at just the visual of that. It was so funny to me. Like,
Okay.
and I mean, can you at least appreciate even cinematically the camera doing some pretty interesting things in that movie? The whole Joliet scene at the very beginning, the setup of him leaving jail. First of all, the movie starts with what looks like a sort of apocalyptic wasteland of just like industrial smokestacks and
Yeah,
stuff. And
yeah.
it's nighttime, and then you realize it's just Joliet.
Yeah.
And then it kind of does these pretty cool, you know, sort of like helicopter shots of the prison, and then even as like Jake is leaving, there's like an interesting shot where the camera's below the grates and does this
watching
weird sort
him.
of swing action thing.
And then when the prison gates open and the sunlight comes pouring
Yeah.
through. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so it's not like it's
Sure.
just a lazily done movie either. And even like the chase scenes, I mean, first of all, they're real, which we talked about in Mad Max in itself has maybe its own merits, maybe not. But
Yeah.
you know, the scenes make sense. I think if that was
They
something
do.
you were
They
critiquing
do.
about Mad Max,
They do. They yep.
And there's some awesome stuff that maybe these days you'd see a GoPro handle, but like going 120 miles an hour and having a camera on. And I was reading in, I guess it was some of the trivia that they were actually going that fast, and that they had
2
to
runs,
yeah,
2 passes under the L.
right, and that they had to act. The first one they did with no pedestrians for safety, but they realized then it just looked like they sped up the film.
Yeah.
And they wanted to make sure you knew that they were actually going that fast.
fast.
So they put
Yeah.
they put like
I had read
you
that
know.
before, and I watched for it, and I was like, yeah, that is impressive.
Yeah.
And
But I love that
remember
there's-
one shot
it
that I
doesn't
really
ju-
liked.
Yeah, go
where
ahead.
it was just when the cop car flips over in the mall, and
it's spinning. Yeah.
and the camera's mounted to the hood. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is a cool shot.
And I think, I don't know. I mean, I just
Yeah.
feel like it's a well done movie in the sense that it sets its tone well enough to where you don't need to necessarily worry about whether you should feel bad that cars are flying
Yeah.
through walls and properties
sure.
being destructed and they're careening through pedestrians. It's done in such a way where you really don't, you know, you're not supposed
Yeah.
to really care that much. Like
Absolutely.
it's fine. You're watching a fun movie. You know?
Yeah, no, I didn't have that issue at all. I wasn't sitting there going like, how these boys are so irresponsible.
Yes.
I was with it like as far as that went. I think John Landis is a very good filmmaker. American Werewolf in London, I really enjoyed. I really like Three Amigos. Animal House
Three
is
Amigos
funny.
is one of my. I like Three Amigos more than this. If that makes you feel.
Oh,
better.
I absolutely do.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, that is good because I think Three Amigos is much funnier than this. Even though I just watched Life Itself, the documentary about Roger Ebert, and he hated that movie.
Yeah, it's weird.
It was,
Yeah,
whatever. I don't know how he felt about Blues Brothers. I didn't look it up.
But Three Amigos is also a lot more hinged on the performances of the comedy actors.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that
And in
up.
here, that's not really what the movie relies on. Now, obviously, they're the main characters,
I
so
think
you
the
need
movie
that,
could have
but-
used it a little bit more. Jake and Elwood are such flat characters to me. Dan Aykroyd especially, I find not funny. And he's supposed to be, I'm fairly certain. in this movie, right? He's supposed to be funny at times.
I mean, at times,
I mean,
yeah.
I know
you know
he's
when
not,
yeah.
I know he's not like at all like Chevy Chase in his movies, who's just constantly trying to get you to laugh.
Right.
But his character just bugged me. Not his character. Dan Aykroyd bugged me because it felt so half-assed and non-committal. It was like, even though he wrote it and created the characters, it's like he didn't even know or like or care about who Elwood was. He was counting on the Chicago accent maybe being funny, but he's just so flat the whole time. He's like, when he dances, he's not awkward. He's funny. He's not good, so it's impressive. Same with his singing, same with his harmonica playing. Like, there's just nothing impressive about them as performers in this movie. I think John Belushi was wasted. I mean, obviously he was completely wasted the whole time, but I think his talents
more ways than one.
I think his talents were wasted in this movie because he does very little, except for a couple scenes where he yells, and then that scene where that's way oversimplifying it, I understand that. But that scene in the restaurant where he uses that funny voice.
How much for the little girl? The women. How much for the women?
What?
Your women. I want to buy your women, the little girl, your daughters. Sell them to me. Sell me your children. Mater D. Mater D.
Okay. I just, more than anything, Dan Aykroyd's performance bugged me because I was like, just commit to something for a second. Like,
that's got to be totally in your interpretation because
maybe.
I mean, he is so into this movie though.
I know.
I mean,
he
like
is.
this
I
is
might
like
not-
this is
it
this
might
is
just
like
be Dan Aykroyd that I don't like.
maybe because this is like his baby, and I remember even reading that like John Landis
I think too
told
much so.
him to tone it down in a lot of his
Tone what
performances.
down?
His like because Landis was the one that was saying we need you guys to be more deadpan. That's your character, and like
Which I get.
Aykroyd was doing more like sort of just I guess putting more into it as far as like trying to pull out the jokes and be more physical with his comedy. And Landis was the one that was like, you know, you got to tone it, just play it straight. And I mean, it's subtle. I'll give you that. But I mean, there's
What's
a lot
subtle?
of good comedy in the timing. Like there's the scene in the car where they're talking about the Bluesmobile and what happened to the Bluesmobile. And he's talking about getting the police car at the Mount Prospect police auction. And he's like,
The car's got a lot of pickup. It's got a cop motor, a 440 cubic inch plant. It's got cop tires, cop suspension, cop shocks. It's a model made before catalytic converters, so it'll run good on regular gas. What do you say? Is it the new Bluesmobile or what? Fix a cigarette lighter.
delivered by other people, you never would have gotten any sort of even hint that there was comedy in that. But to me, it was just so well timed, and you had that with the earlier he had thrown the cigarette lighter out, and
I know.
it was all put together in a way that it pulled some laughs out of me. I don't know. I can't tell you again. I'm not going to argue that.
And that's
you know,
I'm not trying to get you to do that. I'm trying to tell you what I thought was flawed about it. That not just what I didn't think was funny, but what that I thought was not effective about it.
yeah.
And
The deadpan juxtaposition to me is pretty funny in scenes like the country western bar, where bottles are just being thrown at them at the chicken wire and completely unfazed, you know. And I guess that's just sort of that like rock and roll, I guess R&B sort of attitude of it is just
any
like
good performer,
like they just don't let it phase them. They're playing their big show and they've got law enforcement all around and they're basically just welcoming them.
Yeah, it was. You're right. It wasn't over the top. I feel like it's clear now that you say this. It's clear that the deadpan sort of stuff didn't come naturally to Dan Aykroyd. That it wasn't his first choice. That Belushi did it better.
And I also think that Aykroyd knew that Belushi was better. They're both on the screen, but it's Belushi you're really watching most of the time.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I mean,
So I mean, I guess
absolutely
that
agree.
I guess I can maybe concede that, but I don't know. I just don't know that you can't have the movie without Dan Aykroyd, and I mean because he wrote it first of all, and second of all, like
I mean,
it's sort of like these characters were them, and you know,
Yeah.
I guess
What it felt like to me, I know Aykroyd loved it and it was his baby. It felt like it was too much his baby. That to the point that it was like, if he could have done it another way, he would have had a podcast. Like Dan Aykroyd teaches America about the blues.
Yeah,
like
Dan Aykroyd presents Smithsonian Folkways.
Yeah, yeah. Which I think he tried to teach America about extraterrestrials and the paranormal with Ghostbusters, but somebody was there saying like, dude, stop trying to educate people. Like, I'm not like Blues Brothers is overly pedantic or anything. It's just that I feel like Dan Aykroyd's the kind of guy, from what I know of him, who could get too tied up into personal things, and that like Jake and Elwood were his babies.
I will totally grant you that I think Aykroyd he's totally a sketch comedian, in the sense that like usually the bits he comes up with, even the stuff that I remember liking of Aykroyd, it's the kind of
like what?
Like on SNL, Bassomatic 3.
Yeah.
The Bassomatic. You can't make a movie out of that, obviously.
Right.
Like he comes up with that. It's just really funny bit.
Yeah.
There's the other one where he plays the SNL sketch that I love, where he's playing the guy who's like the sleazy salesman selling Halloween costumes.
Yeah.
And like he's
which
like,
is the same kind of character as the Bassomatic guy.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, and
he's
it's the same sort of like voice as he's like trying to use for Elwood too.
And Aykroyd's he's never been one of my favorite players. I don't think I've really seen him in any other movies that I really loved. I never really considered him one of my like A-list comedians. He's always going to be
Soul Man a lot when that was on. Do you remember that show?
Was it? It was a movie, right?
No, it was a TV show.
Oh, that's right.
He was like an Episcopalian priest who
and I guess
was
he went
really
to
into the
seminary
blues
for a little bit.
Well, that's not surprising. There's like a huge Catholic band, and in a deleted scene, Elwood talked about becoming a priest.
Yeah.
Dan Aykroyd like writes his passions, which write what you know usually works, but I think he gets too tied up in it.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
I'm not a Dan Aykroyd fanatic. I just like Blues Brothers. Like he's always going to be.
But he's so much of Blues Brothers that's part of it for me, is that I'm just like his fingerprint, everything is all over it, and I don't dig it.
You think you have to like Dan Aykroyd?
I don't know. I think I dislike Dan Aykroyd enough that it wasn't a personal vendetta. I realized it with this movie. After a while, it just felt like a very vain project. Even the concept of the Blues Brothers, like that they went on Saturday Night Live. Like, so what's the joke? This is a comedy show. Well, no joke, just singing blues. Like, are you really a good blues singer? Like, I can do it. Like, oh, okay.
Well, and I think also Belushi was always the main singer too.
Yeah, he's the lead singer. And
he's not even that great of a singer, and that's kind of the whole thing with that.
Is that the joke? Is there a joke there?
No, I think that's the blues. I think the blues is that you don't have to be a great singer. Like, it's all about sort of the attitude you have, and
okay.
I mean, you got to put all of yourself into it, and maybe that's why you're not buying Aykroyd. It's almost like he put all of himself into the movie, but not all of himself into being a blues brother, like being a performer.
The thing. Right. That's the thing. It's his commitment to the character that I like. It's so clearly Dan Aykroyd being Elwood Blues. I just feel like there's no concept beyond I want to sing some blues songs in a movie.
But I guess even in that, it was cool. I mean, I liked it,
They toured, film a concert, and put it out.
No.
And tell some jokes.
We would not be talking about Blues Brothers the concert 35 years later.
I don't think we should be talking about Blues Brothers the movie.
I'm just thinking it's just this movie that it's hard to categorize in a lot of ways. It's not quite a musical, but there's musical numbers. It's not a full-on SNL style comedy,
right?
But there's funny parts in it. It's not just a sort of
action movie,
cops and robbers action movie, but there's some awesome action scenes in it. And you put all that together, and to me, that's just a fun ride. It's just something that I kind of have to just appreciate. Like, they actually pulled it off. I mean, do you just think the movie doesn't even work as a movie? And I hate when people say it just doesn't work. I mean, but do you think it makes sense, and that somehow they will pulled off all these different tones well, and that like you've got kind of three different
are you just
genres.
Using it as an example, or do you feel like there are different tones that it was trying to pull off? The musical, the comedy, and the action.
Yeah, like you've got three different genres clashing together, and somehow they all seem to.
It wasn't jarring. It wasn't like, okay, this is way too actiony for a comedy, or this is too funny for a musical. Whatever. Like, I mean, they blended it fine.
Yeah.
The story did make sense in that everything they did, they were trying to get the show to go, to make money, to get the band together, except for Carrie Fisher stuff.
Yeah, that stuff I'll give. I mean,
except for the Nazis.
I kind of laughed at that, especially at the end when it really. And that's the other thing, that there are moments in this movie where it sort of almost gets surreal. Like there's that part where they're like falling, like they somehow got dropped higher than a skyscraper,
right,
and fall through.
And he says, "I've always loved you."
Yeah, and then there's in the beginning the nun that just kind of floats. As they're saying goodbye, she kind of just floats. It's just like all of a sudden,
Sister Mary Stigmata, that lady who beats him for swearing.
Yeah.
Did you think that scene was funny?
I thought it was funny when John Belushi fell down the stairs. A physical comedy bit, what it is. And I also thought...
But what about when she was hitting him and they were swearing? Did you think that was funny?
Yeah. I mean, it's not like...
Really? What was funny about it?
How am I supposed to explain that to you? I don't know. I could explain what happens in the scene and say, yeah, it's funny, Ryan. What do you want me to say? I laughed.
Just thought, I don't know. That scene is in particular is very much what I'm talking about with the problem with the performances that I have. It was so clearly hitting marks that they had rehearsed, but not rehearsed to the point that they were perfect. It was just so muddled and messy.
But I feel like you're taking a movie that we're talking about like an early 80s comedy, and we've seen a lot of comedy since then. It's like saying I didn't like Vacation because there was this one scene that didn't work for me.
I'm not saying that. I'm obviously not saying that.
I know you're not, but that's what it feels like. It's like,
I'm
you're saying
that scene is indicative of the problem that I have with the movie. That like it's not funny to me. That it's just like, you guys get the joke, right? Like, here's a joke, we made it.
But don't you think a lot of those movies kind of feel like that once in a while? Even Three Amigos has its moments where you can tell that, like, this is the joke. Like, it doesn't fall as natural as maybe some of the more well-oiled comedies we've seen later.
Every movie I like is without flaw. But to me, that was an early scene, and it's almost like what happens with Saturday Night Live sketches. They have a joke,
they run it,
and they don't know how to end it,
and then they just don't know how to end it. Yeah,
so they keep repeating it.
I mean, to me, there's something to be said for it being the first SNL movie, and it's not worse. Like that the fact that they didn't really bring all of those SNL features into their movie, like a lot of later SNL movies.
I think John Landis had a lot to do with that.
I'm sure. Yeah,
I think later they just had guns for hire that they didn't necessarily,
or they probably brought a lot of those sketch people out to write the movie. I guess I don't really know the history.
I don't either. But
I think
name a director of one of the later SNL movies.
Penelope Spheris with Wayne's World. That's a very good SNL movie. The only other SNL movie I would probably still stand by. Good. There's practically no good SNL movies that came other than, for me, Blues Brothers and probably Wayne's World.
I don't think that I've grown past disliking something because it's popular.
I have not accused you of that.
I know you haven't
at all.
I know you haven't. But I'm trying to assess myself here.
Okay, all right.
But I do think I still kick back against. Well, yeah, it's a classic. You gotta love that
Blues
one.
Brothers.
Yeah. I feel no more generosity towards Blues Brothers because everybody loves it. Like, I don't feel more generosity, but I don't think I'm more critical. I'm not. I don't go in it with more critical spirit. I expected to like it.
Now, let me ask you a question, I'm honestly want to know the answer. Do you extend the same kind of grace to an older comedy that you would extend to like a classic noir or something that maybe, I can love it as a 30s noir, knowing that if it came out today exactly as is, it would probably not be something I'd be a fan of because we've come a long way since then, Yeah. Do you allow that same grace for a comedy? And understanding that maybe some of the jokes that could seem like they're driven into the ground or a little flat or a little too on the nose, that perhaps at the time, coming straight out of going from SNL sketch comedy into a movie, was it something fresh? Was it something fresh and new?
That's. I mean,
maybe it's harder for comedy just because it has to be something so you can't fabricate appreciation for a comedy. I think
I guess. I am not extending it less grace, but I do think I'm probably looking at it differently. Like Double Indemnity, I think is a great movie. And I don't think it's a great movie just because it's foundational in noir. I think it is well acted. Like I mean, that is an amazing noir movie. I think The Big Sleep is another great one along those lines. I don't want to say schlockier, but like the more ingrained in the genre noir movies, like Detour.
And noir is just one. That's just one genre.
I get you. But I'm sticking with it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that I would want to watch Detour again or recommend it to people, because I see it as that foundational, but not good.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, well, that movie sucked because it wasn't as informed. It didn't, it wasn't standing on the shoulders of giants that I've seen. I don't compare it to a movie that came out in the last couple of years, but I still would say, I don't need to see that again, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to people.
Right.
Unless somebody was like, I'm totally in noir, what should I watch? I'm like, oh, well, Detour's really good.
If you want to be exhaustive about it. Yeah.
Right, yeah. And I think what happens with comedy, and that makes it difficult for me to not just say, okay, that was important, I don't need to see it again, I maybe didn't even like the experience, is that people, when you hear it talked about, they still talk about it in current terms. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That like, oh, that movie is funny. Nobody says, oh, you haven't seen that movie? That movie was really funny
At the time.
35 years ago. You should see it to see what people thought was funny back then.
Right. Well,
there are movies from 1980. There are movies from the 70s, 60s, 40s, I think are still funny to me. I do not think that the Blues Brothers is funny now. And I have a harder time, unless it's really groundbreaking and saying, this is the first time anybody did this. Like Steve Martin's stand-up, the first time anybody really did comedy without a punchline.
Right.
Like, even if I don't think everything he does is funny, I am still totally appreciative and will go back to Steve Martin's stand-up because nobody had done that before. And I love hearing that happen for the first time and hearing the audience react to that.
And that's actually a good example
that.
of a comedy movie before Blues Brothers that's probably much more timeless is The Jerk, which is just so timelessly funny. You can pop it in now and it will, it'll go head to head with something like Anchorman, which a lot of people would consider to be a very funny movie today.
Yes. And Anchorman, which for the most part broke a lot of ground too.
Sure.
People hadn't seen a lot of that stuff.
I will admit to you that Blues Brothers is not like the funniest movie I've ever seen or anything like that. I just think that the laughs it gets are real, and also that there's a lot more to it that just makes it a different movie to me. Like it's not just a comedy to me. In a way, did break a lot of ground. I mean, well, even just for the fact that it was one of the most expensive comedies ever made at the time, but also the fact that like I think at the time it had crashed the most cars ever crashed for a movie, 103 or something like that. So, and that's not enough to make a movie great. Obviously, look at Matrix Reloaded, but
which broke the record after.
But I have to look at the movie as a whole.
Okay.
And I still really enjoy it because if the laughs aren't getting me, the music is. If the music isn't getting me, the car chases are. And honestly, when I watched it this time, they all got me. Like I was laughing in the right places. I was having a lot of fun during the car chases when you were supposed to. And the music was good. The artists were great. And I don't think I have the same nostalgia for this movie as other ones, but I do think
seem like it.
But I do think that me seeing it as a kid does sort of maybe flavor or maybe tamper down my expectations watching it now. I probably would have had the same expectations as you if I had just been watching it the first time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like I had already seen it. I kind of knew what I was getting into for the most part. And actually as a kid, I don't remember laughing a ton.
But it was exciting.
And I was kind of wondering when I watched it this time if maybe the reason was that it was a lot of adult humor I didn't get. Not the case. It's just that it wasn't.
The only adult thing about it is they say the F word.
I don't even remember. When did they do that?
A bunch.
Oh, I guess that's me now. I don't even notice it anymore. Oh, it's I was actually, for kicks, I looked at, Common Sense Media. I was looking at their review of the Blues Brothers.
Yeah.
And this is what they said. They said, parents need to know that main characters Elwood and Jake Blues steal, destroy property, attempt to run people over, cheat people out of money, lie, drink, and smoke. In other words, kids, especially teenage boys, will find them irresistibly cool. There's lots of profanity and violence played for laughs. Maybe Common Sense Media really wraps it up for me, and I just think these guys are super cool because they do all this stuff. I'm willing to admit that, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I never saw them as cool. That's one thing too.
Maybe that's it. You never thought they were cool, huh?
Mainly because of Dan Aykroyd. Back to your point, there are vestiges of elitism in me, but not just that I will dislike it because so many people do like it.
Yeah.
But I will have higher expectations because so many people do like it. This is a classic comedy. This is a movie I have to see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then this better
Prove it
be
to
a
me.
good
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah. Show me what you got.
Okay. I did not have to see that. I don't understand anything better other than when my barber made the joke. He said, "What kind of music do you like?" And I said, "Oh, I like all kinds of music." And he said, "Country and Western." And I said, "Oh, not so much country." And he was like, "Oh, it's from Blues Brothers." So I would have been saved the embarrassment of missing my barber's joke.
Yeah.
That's as far as I can tell, that's the only thing that would have changed my life if I had seen Blues Brothers earlier.
I have noticed that Blues Brothers in particular has a huge impact on a lot of like baby boomer white men.
Yeah.
Like huge. Like
and see, that's what it feels like the movie's legacy is.
baby boomer white males.
Yes.
Love this movie.
Not any cinematic or musical influence. So maybe studios are willing to throw more money at comedies after Blues Brothers. So we have movies like, I don't know,
like Pineapple Express or
Austin
something.
Powers,
Yeah.
Pineapple Express. Okay, so once in a while, a big budget comedy came out of that, and that was great. But then we also have Evan Almighty, which is a comedy that got millions, over $100 million thrown at it. Okay.
So this is the point in the episode where Ryan blames Evan Almighty on the Blues Brothers.
Well, I guess so. I haven't seen Evan Almighty. Maybe
I haven't
it's
either,
funny.
so, yeah.
Maybe it's a good movie. I know Steve Carell is a comedic actor who commits to his characters.
And he is very funny.
So maybe there is something funny in Evan Almighty. I thought Bruce Almighty was a pretty good movie. Thought it was fine.
Ooh, we might have an episode on that one. I hate that movie.
Oh, do you?
I hate that movie.
Because I'd watch that 10 times before I watched Blues Brothers again. Yeah.
I got a little sick feeling in my stomach just hearing it.
Well, I don't necessarily have more to say, but what's your favorite, if we can end on maybe just a positive, doesn't really mean anything note. What is your favorite musical number in the movie?
Oh, good question. It depends. I think the honky tonk part is the funniest scene of them playing, but they're playing Rawhide.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily my favorite musical number.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I just like the end. Like I just like the last performance. They did like Sweet Home Chicago.
Yeah.
I think that's like a really good rendition of it.
You know what bugs me about Sweet Home Chicago? Is like that's Jim Belushi's go-to song.
Oh, well, don't bring Jim Belushi.
And it bugs the crap out of me.
I wasn't the Minnie the Moocher part I thought was a little awkward.
Really?
The Cab Calloway stuff.
I really
it's
like.
fine. I like it. It's
See,
just that
as a musical performance. This is so weird.
Yeah.
As a musical performance, I was gonna say Cab Calloway.
That's your
was my
favorite?
favorite.
The gong around. Hidey, 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 hide. Heedy, heedy, heedy. Hidey, 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 ho.
I was like, why are they wearing these tuxes now? Like that was just. I mean, there was some.
That's
weird
almost
stuff
that somewhat
about it.
surrealist kind of
Right.
feel to it, where it doesn't all make sense. You know,
Which, whatever. I didn't fault the movie for
Yeah.
that, honestly. But I just really thought Cab Calloway performing. I was like, yeah, this
That was-
dude knows what he's doing.
you're right.
That was brave of them to put some of the best performers of R&B and then be like, and here's us. We're doing our thing.
I musical number. Yes, you're totally right. I guess movie wise, I felt like it was the most wedged into there.
It
you know?
is, yeah.
So yeah, it's just I guess I'm more coming at it from the angle of what in the movie, kind of like when we go back to our Pitch Perfect,
Yeah.
that the ending number really kind of pulled it all together for you, and
Yeah, but
and-
that had like built to that. To me,
Yeah.
it was just like there was no emotional stake in any of the songs. So I'm just gonna pick the one that I thought like Cab Calloway doing his thing.
yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Even however old. he
yeah, it's a
was, he
different
could
movie
still-
than Pitch Perfect, but yeah,
well, sure,
I mean,
but yeah, I guess the musical it was never there was nothing hinging on them performing. Like if they do a bad job, they're not going to get.
they
the
weren't getting
money.
judged on it or anything in that sense. I mean, then they got people in the seats, so in that sense, the job was done.
Yeah.
But I think that that last performance does just kind of pull together not the movie, but
Mhm.
sort of the Blues Brothers, I guess. Like that's really the first time I feel like you're really seeing the Blues Brothers as an
Yeah,
act
that's true.
performing. And you had kind of been waiting for that, and you got pieces of it here and there. You know, the Ray Charles song.
That was still Ray Charles.
That's
doing
still
it.
Ray Charles. Yeah, this was
And
the
then
first
in
time
Honky Tonks,
yeah.
they weren't doing their stuff. It wasn't. Yeah, you're right. That
And it
was
was
the first time they were able to really bust out and do.
Yeah, and honestly, if you were to turn the movie off and just listen to the music, it's not the best performance necessarily, you know,
No,
because
because
you're
it's John-
comparing it to
it's-
James Brown and Ray Charles, but it's John Belushi singing. So
Yeah.
I think it's just in the movie, it kind of works for me. It sort of ramped it up to the right level for me.
Okay.
You know, one of the last things I'll say
Mhm.
is that I kind of just like the background story of this movie in the sense of it being this movie that was just like wildly over budget, and like everyone thought it was kind of turning into a huge mistake,
Mhm.
and they were bringing in acts that weren't even popular anymore.
Mhm.
And then it ended up just kind of becoming this huge success
Yeah.
and making a lot of money, and
actually
also
worked.
bringing a lot of those great artists back into the mainstream. You know, I don't know that I ever would have gotten into like James Brown live at the Apollo if I hadn't originally seen Blues Brothers, and that was my connection with, because you don't even know music history wise, like if anything else would have brought these artists back into the mainstream. It's not like they were going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And they've always had critical acclaim.
Mhm.
But as far as like popular audiences getting back into this music, I don't know. I just kind of like the fact that the Blues Brothers kind of did that, and also did it in this subversive way where it spent a shitload of money and like had barely any script when it went into it. This is something kind of wild about that, you know?
That's true.
So as we are winding down our Blues Brothers discussion, why don't we talk about what our relationship is looking like at the end of this? We've got either we're best buds, we've got a mutual understanding, or it's complicated. So, yeah, how are you feeling about this?
I don't know. I'm willing. I would think we've got a mutual understanding.
Okay.
I kind of feel like we've hashed something like this out before, and we have a little bit of a better feel for what the other person's saying,
Yeah.
rather than it being complicated. What about you? Are you
Yeah, I
okay
think
with
I can
that?
say that. I mean, I feel like I understand where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you understand where I'm coming from. I don't think we're gonna necessarily feel like we need to have this argument again.
No.
You know,
Sure.
we can shake on it.
Okay.
You know? So we'll have a
Not literally, but
no.
figuratively, we'll shake on it.
Yeah, I don't want to touch you.
No.
So yeah, we'll keep it as a mutual understanding.
All right. So has your star rating changed
No,
after
I'm-
hearing me?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the more I thought about it, it's not as funny as I maybe thought it was. So I could see knocking it back, but then again, I just had a really good time. I don't know. It's
Okay.
it's either 3.5 or 4, and I
All right.
figure why not? I'll keep it at a 4-star rating.
All right. Yeah, I'm kind of waffling too. I could give it a half star.
Yeah,
I'll give it a half star. 3
more,
stars.
more like an appreciation kind of
3
thing.
stars
maybe
for Blues Brothers because Nate enjoyed it so much. Also 3 stars for letting me not like it.
Okay. I'm glad. Well, you're welcome.
All right. So,
Well, why don't we go ahead and we'll talk about what are we going to be discussing in our next episode?
Well, we're both excited about Pixar's new movie, Inside Out.
We're both
coming
Pixar
out.
fans. Yeah.
We are, though we were also just discussing off mic. Pixar's it needs a good movie.
It needs this. It needs this.
It needs
I think.
this one. I will start to have a little less faith in Pixar if Inside Out doesn't live up to my expectations. But we don't agree on every Pixar movie.
Right.
So for the next...
Well, really just one.
Well, that's not everyone.
True. Yeah.
So for the next episode, we're going to be watching The Incredibles, directed by Brad Bird, a movie that I think is tremendous, and I think I've called it my favorite Pixar movie.
Yeah, which...
But that may have been before Toy Story 3 came out.
Okay.
But it might still be. Who
You
knows?
don't know.
After we watch, Nate, on the other hand, was not so impressed with
No,
The Incredibles. Now,
It's probably my least... Well...
Ooh.
We're
Okay,
not talking
I
about
gotcha,
we're not
I
talking about
gotcha.
the late. We're not talking about the sequels.
taking out Cars and
also taking out
Monsters
Brave
and
just because I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen Brave either. Maybe we should be doing Brave.
Maybe we'll watch it before, also to bring it into the conversation.
Maybe.
In context. But if I had to rank what I've seen of Pixar that isn't Cars 2 or Cars, it would probably be pretty low on the list, probably at the bottom. So
Interesting.
yeah.
All right. Well,
So
there you have it. Nate.
I am willing to give it another chance. I am willing to
course
maybe
you are.
admit
That's
that I
the
missed
point
a
of this
lot.
podcast.
Exactly. So
Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this. So there you have it, folks. A movie that I like and Nate doesn't like.
you
so
don't get this
much.
very often.
So yeah, watch The Incredibles with us if you have anything you need to say about Blues Brothers that isn't just abuse at Nate for loving it or abuse at me for hating it.
And quoting lines.
Right, yeah. We don't need that.
We don't need that.
We've got the IMDb quote page if we really want to read. We're on a mission from God once more. But if you've got thoughts about Blues Brothers, if you agree with me, if you agree with Nate, if you have something that you think we missed, we'd love to hear it. Also, The Incredibles. If you are a fan of that movie or you don't like that movie, let us know why or why not.
Yeah.
And we would love to have those things to look for as we watch the movie again.
Absolutely. It always helps to kind of hear a few other opinions going into a movie. So if you do decide to kind of interact with us in any way, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can always send us an email, feedback@canwestillbefriends.net. You can always comment on our episode itself if you want to say something about Blues Brothers. Canwestillbefriends.net is the website. We are on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're on Letterboxd. If you feel like following us there, just type in our names and you can see what movies we've been watching lately. Mm-hmm. And you can give us a phone call if you so desire. So you can pull out your cellular telephone or your landline phone, if you have one, and leave us a message, 847-306-9532. It would be great to hear from you. So, thank you for listening to our Blues Brothers discussion. I hope you got something out of it.
Yeah.
Thank you, as always, for listening to the podcast, and we will catch you next time when we discuss The Incredibles.